All right, what's up, Stitt heads? We are back. This time, I know we got looming war with Iran going on. We got Epstein files, but today we're going to be talking a little more about the X Files type situations. I don't know if we got distractions going on or if we got real disclosure, but welcome to the show, Ryder Lee, man. Let's break this down a little bit.
Thanks so much for having me on, brother. Really appreciate it. And yeah, we're in really fascinating times. We've got so much stuff happening, the Epstein files, the UFO files, war with Iran. There's so much going on all at one time. And I think that I've been saying on my show for a long time, we never get the conclusion to anything that happened before. We're just kind of shuffled on to the next thing. And with the Epstein files, there was 3.5 million files dropped, and it's going to take a really long time to get through that. And we've just kind of now scratched the surface of that. And now we're going to be shuffled on to something completely different, which is the supposed UFO files, which happened when Obama got on some random person's podcast that no one's really ever heard of, kind of popped up out of nowhere, like a lot of these I don't know, intelligence types of podcast
Mm-hmm.
infiltration is starting to kind of happen, definitely from the left, because the right has kind of dominated these spaces for a really long time. And now we have Netflix doing podcasts now. I don't know if you've
I
seen,
saw that. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's unbelievable. And that's not even a podcast, dude. Like a podcast is the only way that you can designate yourself as a podcast is if you have an audio only version of the podcast. Like you're not a
Mm-hmm.
podcast if you don't have an audio only version. Now they're talking about that it's just two people talking, and that means that it's a podcast. It doesn't make any sense, but it seems like we're getting this heavy infiltration in from the left into these spaces. And I'm not right or left. I'm just saying what it is.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of really tend to stay out of politics in a lot of different ways, but I'll still comment on certain things that are going on.
That's
But
the good thing about me being like a registered libertarian is like I can sit back and be like, "Hey, let me talk crap about the right for a minute." Oh, you're on our side? No, let me talk crap about your side for a minute too. Let's just keep it as real as possible.
well, we've been so polarized on each side, and when you criticize one side, they think that you are of the other side. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? So if you criticize the left, they think you're on the right, and if you criticize the right, they think that you're on the left. It's just this complete polarization of the entire political system, which then gets into this entire UFO topic, because the UFO topic has been a polarization from the very beginning. Huge rise in the contactee and ufology community as a whole, which is used to really play upon superstition and folklore in a lot of different ways. And really understanding this component of the entire UFO phenomenon is really important. And this is where the entire modern myth starts, is with Kenneth Arnold in 1947. Now, that's not where the phenomenon starts. It tracks way back thousands of years, but they weren't called UFOs or flying saucers back then. They were shields, they were pillars, they were flying chariots. I know the history of this stuff, but I'm talking about modern times here, because you always have that, that one person in the comment section of every single video referencing the Vedas or the Book of Ezekiel or Enoch to reinforce their preconceived notions about UFOs and extraterrestrials, and they use that as proof. And they would be right in saying that some sort of phenomenon goes back further than 1947. And you also have the Battle of LA and all that stuff, which it does. But we're not focusing on that. We're focusing on modern sightings and how the term flying saucer came to be, because they weren't called flying saucers before Kenneth Arnold in 1947. Okay, Kenneth Arnold really kicked off the entire phenomena and termed the phenomenon flying saucers. But this turns out to be a giant misinterpretation and misunderstanding of what he said that he saw. So, for the people that aren't familiar with Kenneth Arnold, he was a very well respected aviator. He was a businessman, and later he became a politician. He, again, was one of the first in modern times to report a strange craft in the sky. At around 3 p.m. on June 24th, 1947, Kenneth Arnold was piloting his A-2 plane in the skies around Mount Rainier, Washington, searching for a missing Marine aircraft. And he claimed to have witnessed a string of 9 objects at around 10,000 feet. They flew at what he said amazing speeds of what Arnold estimated at around 1,500 miles an hour. And after witnessing these craft, he landed his plane in Yakima, Washington, and told his friend Al Baxter about the sighting. Arnold then shared his story with other pilots and friends and people and told them what he had saw. And they responded as saying that what he must have saw was military missiles or military planes or a military project. And that's a pretty good explanation because if you look at the actual drawings of what Arnold said that he saw, it looks very similar to a B-2 stealth bomber, which was a classified aircraft at that time, and it was revealed years later. But Arnold not being convinced by his friends that this must have been some sort of military missile or military craft, he walked into a local news station and he told his story to a gentleman named Nolan Skiff. Now, Nolan published a short article, and then that story was then forwarded to the Associated Press for worldwide distribution, and the term flying saucer was born. Now, it's important in the beginning to realize that Kenneth Arnold was very reserved about his account and the craft that he witnessed, but the story progressed and public interest became so popular and it turns into this gigantic media frenzy. Okay, now when you look at Arnold's testimony, which he did a lot of interviews and a lot of radio shows, he never used the term flying saucer to describe the shape of the craft. Okay, he said that it was bat shaped, crescent shaped, boomerang shaped with wings, and he said that his comments on the sightings were misunderstood, and he even worked very hard up until the end of his life in 1984 to combat this entire flying saucer narrative. Okay, so the sketches that Kenneth Arnold drew to describe what he saw doesn't even come close to the commonly accepted version of what UFOs look like. And then later on in 1960, an artist's rendition of what Arnold saw came out, and that doesn't look anything like a flying saucer. Okay, now what had happened was Nolan Skiff, the journalist that published Arnold's story in the newspaper, said that Arnold sighted 9 saucer-like aircraft. And the media took, that wasn't even a quote from Arnold. He just created that. And the media took the saucer-like aircraft and ran with it and created headlines. Saucer-shaped craft spotted, when Arnold literally never referred to the shape of the craft as saucer in shape. It was bat-shaped, crescent-shaped, shaped like a boomerang, and sometimes even he said it was shaped like a pie plate or a pie pan. Okay. An interview with Arnold by the United Press, he said that they were half moon shaped, oval in the front, and convex in the back. So in 1960, Arnold came out with a drawing of the craft he saw, and it is bat shaped, circular shaped, winged in the back. And you'd think that Arnold coming out with this drawing of the craft would stop all of the flying saucer talk, but it didn't. It's too late by then. The flying saucer narrative would become such a huge topic, others reporting seeing flying saucers, and there wasn't any correcting the narrative at that point. The narrative had spun out of control, and it had gone so far that there was no reeling it back in. So this became a frenzy topic, everybody reporting strange craft. Now, this is a quote directly from Arnold in relation to what everybody else, because this really started the entire thing. Everyone started seeing flying saucers after that and reporting in flying saucers, which really speaks to what is actually happening here. It's the same with Bud Hopkins. It's the same with several people in this space. Whenever they put out something in a book or the media talks about it, everybody starts seeing it. And it becomes this very popular, it's an egregore is what it is. Another quote from Arnold states that he feels that the phenomena should be labeled something different, a strange type of aircraft instead of a flying saucer. So on April 7th, 1950, Arnold spills the beans on the whole entire flying saucer misrepresentation and misquote. Arnold said that the objects that he witnessed fluttered like they were boats on really rough water. And this part is the most important part because it's where the misrepresentation came from and the misquote. He said when the crafts flew, they flew like a saucer thrown across water. He said that from the very beginning. And most newspapers misunderstood and misquoted him, saying that the shape of the craft was saucer in shape, when Arnold said
Mm-hmm.
that they flew like saucers being thrown across water, not that the shape of the
Mm-hmm.
craft was saucer in shape. Okay. He said that they flew like saucers being skipped across water, like a rock being skipped across water. And the headline said that they were saucer in shape, which is probably the biggest misquote of all time and misunderstanding of all time, which really kicked off this entire thing. And later on, Arnold, started changing his thoughts and his ideas about what they were, saying that they were jellyfish and that they could change shape and then morph into whatever they wanted you to see, and related it to the Bible and the book of Ezekiel. And he was more than likely one of the first people to do that. That was in 1952, which Arnold has. He had many other sightings after that. He had 8 other sightings after 1947 that really no one talks about. But they were probably more than likely misidentified birds or balloons or whatever. But here's the really important
Mm-hmm.
part. Now, when we get into the term of what flying saucer actually was, because before it was associated with the UFO phenomenon, flying saucers was a sport that predated Arnold sightings by over 60 years, which was called trap shooting, which was started in the late 1800s as a way to train hunters and
Yeah, like
shooters.
shooting clay pigeons. Yeah.
Exactly, in which they would release the live birds, and then later on it became changed to these clay pigeons because animal rights activists said that you're just killing a bunch of birds. But a man named Charles Lewinsky in 1980, he dubbed these little clay pigeons flying saucers. Okay, so by the early 1900s, flying saucers, clay pigeons, had become very popular as a sport. There were competitions, championships, and the skies of North America were. There were newspaper articles with headlines in the early 1900s that said skies are covered in flying saucers flying through the air, exploding and falling to the ground, which is the exact replica of the phrases of what everyone thought several decades later with Kenneth Arnold sightings and the Roswell incident. By the 20th century, the name flying saucer had become a common name used for over 2 decades. The sport of flying saucers became so popular, it was adopted by the Olympics in 1916. The number of participants in the sport of flying saucers was 600,000 people in the US. They all knew the term flying saucers, and these little clay pigeons were called flying saucers. The military even adopted it to train their soldiers in target practice at the beginning of World War II. So you put two and two together there. Okay, so we have clay pigeons being called flying saucers since 1880, hundreds of thousands of people being familiar with the term. The military adopted the term and the practice in the early 40s during World War II, and 2 years after the war ended, we get the term flying saucer, but under a different context. This is all laid out in the book by my friend Chris Albeck. He's been on my show a few times now, and he really immerses you into the Kenneth Arnold sightings. He shows pictures of these clay pigeons. He shows how all of this is related together. The name of the book is called Saucers. You can get it on Amazon Prime. So what we have here is that the entire UFO subject in ufology is based upon a fallacy. And ufology has been using the shape of a round disc when it was never described by Arnold as a disc or a flying saucer. We've initially had the shape wrong this entire time. Yeah, we've essentially been telling and regurgitating a misrepresentation of what Arnold said that he saw. And out of Arnold's own words, what other people claimed to have saw at the time wasn't the same as what he saw, or it was absolutely nothing at all. Okay. And I challenge anyone to find a quote of Arnold saying that the shape of the craft was saucer-like, not what other people quoted him as saying, because they obviously got it wrong and misinterpreted his words. But find a quote of Arnold himself saying that the craft that he witnessed on June 24th, 1947, was flying saucer in shape. You can't, and you won't, because it doesn't exist. The flying saucer mythology is a lie. It's a fallacy, it's a misnomer, it's a misrepresented quote from a newspaper reporter, journalists, and researchers. And it's still the most popular symbol of ufology to this very day. Even though it's not called flying saucers anymore, flying saucers are the basis and the root of modern ufology. Every conference, every UFO documentary, YouTube thumbnails, and I use it too. Okay.
Mhm.
Use the flying saucer art when it's a lie. That's never what they look like.
Are they going to just show us military stuff that they've been hiding, or do you think there's going to be any real disclosure on things that we've been questioning forever?
Well, that gets you into a completely different topic of Paul Benowitz. Are you familiar with Paul Benowitz? Paul Benowitz and all the events that surrounded him in 1979. Paul Benowitz was an American businessman and a UFO investigator. Benowitz, he was born in Kansas. He earned a bachelor's degree from Arizona State, and during World War II, Benowitz was a radio electronics engineer for the Coast Guard. He worked as an engineer for San Francisco CBS station and a radio station in Tucson. Around February 25th, 1949, Benowitz married Cindy Brunch in Phoenix, Arizona. Around 1953, Benowitz moved to New Mexico and began his own industrial sales company. In 1966, Benowitz acquired the rights to a humidity sensor from the National Laboratories. He founded a scientific company called Thunder Scientific, a small family business with his wife Cindy, that would develop high-powered instruments for NASA and the Air Force. So during the 1970s, Benowitz became a member of Arizona's Aerial Phenomenon Research Organization, which was a civilian UFO investigation group which was ran by the CIA, right? By the mid 1970s, cattle mutilations became associated with UFOs. On April 20th, 1979, the U.S. Attorney R.E. Thompson and the U.S. Senator Harris Schmitt held a public meeting about cattle mutilations. This was in Arizona. The meeting was attended by around 80 people. One of the attendees was Paul Benowitz. Now, some say that this meeting about cattle mutilations, this was where the targeting began by the government agents, where it first happened. Because at this meeting,
Mm.
Paul Benowitz was introduced to a highway patrol officer, Gabe Valdez, okay, who was investigating the incidents, which is important to understand and remember Gabe Valdez because he becomes really important later on in the story. So Benowitz later listed July 1979 as the beginning of a personally funded study into UFOs because Benowitz reportedly began filming strange lights outside of his house and recording unusual radio signals over Kirkland Air Force Base because he lived right by Kirkland Air Force Base. Benowitz would go into his backyard, his back patio, and Kirkland Air Force Base was only a half a mile away. He'd see these strange lights, mainly supposedly two bright lights, slowly lift up off of the ground and then zip around the mountain. So common sense tells you that if you're filming strange stuff over a military base, that it would be what?
Military. Yeah.
There you go. Okay, so like Jeremy Corbell and taking all these pictures over flares over military base and calling them UFOs, and then they're proven to be flares. He's changing the aperture of the camera to make it look like a triangle craft and all this stuff. If you're taking photos and videos over a military base, common sense and critical thinking tells you that it's the military. So Paul, being a radio expert, very well versed in radio technology because he had worked in the military as a radio expert. He decided to try and listen into the communications at Kirkland Air Force Base to try and figure out what these strange lights were and what he was seeing was. So he decoded a bunch of transmissions and put together that it was about technology and that the technology wasn't from here. So he began his journey into the extraterrestrial realm. So in October of 1980, Benowitz contacted Kirkland Air Force Base to report his findings. Like any good Samaritan would, if you're seeing these strange lights moving in really weird speeds in the sky and you were filming them and you were already a part of the military before, you would contact the military and be like, hey, what's going on here? So in November
Hmm.
of 1980, Benowitz briefed people at Kirkland Air Force Base on his findings. The military personnel possibly thought that maybe this was a Soviet threat or another country or someone planning to invade the base. So, to figure out more about what Paul Benowitz had recorded and to verify his claims to make sure it wasn't a threat per se, they put him in contact with a man named Richard Doty, AFOSI, Air Force Office of Special Investigations, Richard Doty. Paul, not really knowing what he had because he didn't analyze the footage properly. He didn't analyze the decoded message, the messages properly. They sent out Richard Doty to figure out what was going on. So they sent him to his house, and pretty quickly after going to his house to speak with him, Richard Doty found out that he essentially had top secret radio transmissions from the Air Force Base that didn't have anything to
Hmm.
do with extraterrestrials. But Richard Doty came in and convinced him that it was extraterrestrials and it had to do with
Gotcha.
extraterrestrial craft, right? Now, not outright telling him for a fact that it was extraterrestrials, but planting that seed, right? That
Hmm.
maybe that what he has is the information from extraterrestrials and that the radio transmissions could possibly come from extraterrestrials and UFOs. And with Paul Benowitz being a World War II vet, it was very easy to convince him to keep quiet about this thing. Like, be quiet, Paul. You owe it to the country to not say anything about this and not say it to anyone. Keep all your information and all your video stuff to yourself. And we'll help you investigate these UFOs that you're seeing from the back porch over Kirkland Air Force Base. Right. But it wasn't just Doty that was doing this. All of the generals during Paul Benowitz's briefing at the Air Force was in on it. Okay. After Paul showed the footage of what he had captured, the strange craft, which was top secret experimental military drones, a general
Hmm.
stood up and said, you have some pretty convincing evidence there, Paul, and asked him, what would you like the Air Force to do about it? And Paul wanted a grant to continue to study UFOs on the base and a grant to continue his contact with aliens that he claimed that he had. Now, this is where it gets really strange because the Air Force wasn't aware that Paul believed that he was in contact with aliens. Okay. We've established that the Air Force is special investigators like Richard Doty and really all of the Air Force personnel were involved in this briefing were pushed Paul Benowitz in this direction of extraterrestrials and UFOs when really what he was getting footage of was top secret experimental aircraft and in order to get him off of the scent of top secret military aircraft, they made him believe that it was extraterrestrials. But another agency was involved. It wasn't just the Air Force. What had happened was that Paul Benowitz was picking up these signals from Kirkland Air Force Base, but he didn't really know that that was the case. He thought that he was picking up extraterrestrial communications. Okay. So it turns out that the NSA was posted up across the street and in a van and would directly beam radio signals into Paul Benowitz's antenna on top of his house to make Paul believe
Of course. Yeah.
that he was in communication with extraterrestrials. And it even went further than that. The NSA broke into Paul Benowitz's house and replaced his computer with an NSA modified computer. The computer had software installed on it to decode the messages that were being sent in a way that they wanted Paul to see them. Okay, so in these
Hmm.
messages that Paul thought that he was receiving from extraterrestrials, which was really the NSA, this is where a lot of the UFO and alien mythology come from. Comes from this interaction between Paul Benowitz and the NSA, which he thinks is actual extraterrestrial communications. Okay, like they're coming here for our resources, that they want to take over the world, that they want to mix their DNA with our DNA, and that they're from the future, like all of
Yeah,
the
they need our gold and all those. Yeah.
and it gets even worse, okay? Because in May of 1980, state police in New Mexico received a report about a woman calling herself Myrna Hansen, okay, describing a story involving extraterrestrial aliens, bright lights, abductions, cattle mutilations, cattle being abducted. Police then referred to their colleague, which was Gabe Valdez, who they knew to be the cattle
Hmm.
mutilations guy from the meeting earlier that Paul was in, because they knew that Valdez was interested in this stuff. And then Valdez, in turn, contacted Paul Benowitz. So on
Gotcha.
May 7th, 1980, Myrna Hansen and her son traveled to Albuquerque to meet with Benowitz, staying at his home. Hansen explained to Benowitz that on May 5th, 1980, while she was driving with her son near a place called Eagle Nest, New Mexico, they had witnessed two large silent objects approximately the size of a Goodyear blimp hovering over the meadow. Okay, so this is just exactly like if you're filming stuff over a military base. If you see something that looks like a blimp, then it's probably a blimp. Okay, so
Hmm.
Benowitz gets in contact with this guy named Leo Sprinkle, uh, and which was a hypnotherapist that came down to regress Myrna Henson to unlock her memories of what had happened and if she had been abducted. And he was a psychologist and a professor from Wyoming that had also been investigating UFO contact reports, and Benowitz arranged for him to come and fly to Albuquerque to hypnotize Henson. Okay. So whenever Leo got there, Henson and Benowitz insisted that the regression sessions be conducted in Benowitz's Lincoln Town car parked inside of his garage, with the car windows covered with thick aluminum foil. Okay, Paul's literally out of his mind because of the psychological warfare that the NSA and the Air Force OSI has been putting him through. Okay, at this point, which I don't blame him. Okay, you got the NSA right across the street from your house, stalking you, beaming signals into your house. They broke into your home. They replaced your computer with an NSA modified computer to make you believe that you're in contact with aliens, but he doesn't know any of that. He thinks all this stuff is real. You would be super.
Zero gaslighting.
You got the Air Force telling him that you're right about the aliens, but you can't tell anybody. Okay, so Sprinkle decided to regress this woman in the tinfoiled out car in Benowitz's garage. And during her first regression, she reported a recollection of a cow being sucked up in a laser beam and spaceships and tractor beams and everything, sucking the cow up into a UFO. And then in May of 1980, under hypnosis, Henson reported recollections of an abduction, her being abducted, taken to an underground base with body parts floating in vats. Okay, this is building the basis
Mm.
of this secret base in New Mexico. Okay, the Duluth base or the Dulce base, whichever one you want to call it. People get super picky about their terminology. But that later turned into no, Phil Schneider's story. Okay,
Yeah.
which is the perfect setup here for Bill Moore's book of Roswell called The Roswell Incident, just a few years later in October 1980, which was all myths and disinformation about an alien craft crashing in Roswell, which was the popularized myth and lore that brought it to the forefront of ufology. Nobody talked about Roswell until his book, Bill Moore's book, came out called The Roswell Incident in 1980. Before this, it
Mm.
was not even a thing. Okay. And Bill Moore was involved with Paul Benowitz. He would go to Paul Benowitz's house. He was also involved with Richard Doty in the Air Force OSI. And eventually, Bill Moore, I did a whole series about this on my show called The Legends of Ufology. And Bill Moore got up in front of a UFO conference in 1989, I believe it was, and said that everything was made up, that the book was made up, that this was all public mis and disinformation, and they literally boot him off of the stage. Okay, so,
Wow.
but back to Myrna Henson and this Paul Benowitz setup, because this is exactly what it was. It was a setup with this lady, Myrna Henson, and to get the lore and, myth, and the mythology rolling, because they knew Paul Benowitz would tell everyone, and this would snowball into a bunch of nonsense. Okay, so Henson, along with claiming to see these large blimp-like crafts, she also recalled having been given an implant by the aliens
Mm.
during her regression with Sprinkle. And then that starts all this alien implant lore. Okay. Sprinkle returned to visit Benowitz to perform another regression with Henson to figure out more made up nonsense garbage. He found that Benowitz was in his house armed with a pistol and a gun and a rifle, saying that he was concerned that he was vulnerable to being attacked by aliens. These people,
Dang.
these people were literally driving Paul Benowitz out of his mind. To the point that where he was thinking that he was going to be attacked by alien laser beams. And Paul Benowitz thinking that Sprinkle was an alien or whatever it was that he thought, told him to leave. And then he contacted another hypnotherapist by the name of James Harder. James Harder was also conducted hypnotic regressions of the famous abductee Travis Walton in 1975. But Benowitz and James Harder came to the conclusion that Henson was under the influence of alien beams and wrote detailed instructions on how to use aluminum foil to shield a room from the beams before conducting a regression. This is literally where a lot of the tinfoil hat stuff comes from, and no one really has any idea that it came from the government and disinformation surrounding Paul Benowitz. But a lot of people also say that it came from this gentleman that got a tooth implant that believed that he was hearing voices in his head. It was one of the founding members of the Kodak camera. They wanted to
That's
try
funny.
and get him out of the contract with Kodak, and they hired these two doctors to implant this microchip in his tooth.
Yeah, because he went for a dental visit, I believe, right?
Yes. Then
Yeah.
he ended up in a mental institution and started wrapping his head in tinfoil because he said that prevented the voices in his head. Okay, so
Hmm.
Paul Benowitz was convinced that he was seeing extraterrestrials, and then when it was really advanced military craft, and that he was in communication with extraterrestrials through his computer when it was really the NSA. Gabriel Valdez's son later commented on the Myrna Henson story and said it's a possibility that Myrna Henson was also a part of the disinformation campaign. You think? You think that she was? She definitely was. I will go out on a limb here and say that the story of Myrna Henson was most likely a well orchestrated hoax, because it's a very important fact. The listening devices were found in Paul Benowitz's house. The government heard all of the conversations on the phone that Paul Benowitz was having, anything that he was talking about in his house. So it would be very easy to do. Myrna Henson came into the picture of in 1980, and it's hard to really figure out anything about this Myrna Henson lady, because Myrna Henson is also the name of a famous actress and model who won Miss USA in 1993. But I'm willing to bet money that she was sent by the intelligence community directly to Paul Benowitz. And it's a perfect cover too, because can't find out anything about who she is. They just created a new name for her and made it a name that was this popular USA, Miss USA that won in 1953. But now you get into the full swing of the Dulce base and all of the mythology and all the rumors and the theories and the speculation of that base started because of the information that was given to Paul Benowitz by the government mis and disinformation. Air Force Special Agents, the NSA, Myrna Henson. Okay, in December of 1981, Paul Benowitz wrote a letter to a U.S. senator explaining that he knew the location of the alien bases in northern New Mexico and that someone in the military made a deal with the aliens several years ago, giving the Indian
Mhm.
land cattle and the apparent assurance of safety to the aliens in trade for technology in some form of atomic powered ship. Alien base would later then be regurgitated by conspiracies and ideas by John Lear, Bill Cooper, and like I was mentioning earlier, the Phil Schneider case where he claimed that he was working on this base and he got his hand blown off by an alien laser. Okay.
Mm.
All of these stories came from Paul Benowitz. All these modern stories of aliens and alien bases all came from
Crazy.
Paul Benowitz, which is mis and disinformation directly from the NSA and the Air Force and this lady, Myrna Henson. That letter that he sent to that congressman was all of the information that he had gotten through the regression of Myrna Henson, which was this fake CIA setup
Mhm.
or NSA setup or someone in the intelligence community. It was a setup. And that's where all these stories come from. That's what Bill Cooper always talked about. And like we were mentioning in the 80s, was this contract with the US government and extraterrestrials for technology exchange. And he added that it was, Eisenhower that sealed the deal, but he just changed it and modified it just a little bit. So by 1982, Benowitz began contacting all of the UFO researchers, Linda Moulton Howe, John Lear, U.S. Senator Harris, and was spreading all of his ideas regarding this alien base in New Mexico and the ufology community. And boom, UFO mythology has taken its root, and it came directly from the NSA and the Air Force. And what I believe was the intelligence agent Myrna Henson and Air Force agents, right? It was born then. And Paul Benowitz suffered several psychiatric hospitalizations after 1980 due to the Air Force and the NSA deceptions. And he passed away June
Of
30th,
course, yeah.
2003 in Albuquerque, New Mexico. All of that I covered, because I like to give credit to people, all of that I just covered was all info that was detailed in the book Clear Intent, the government cover up of the UFO experience, and also a book by Mark Pillington, which was called Project Beta and the Story of Paul Benowitz and the National Security and the Creation of the Modern UFO Myth, which then that book was
Mm.
then turned into a documentary 8 years later in 2013 called Mirage Men. It's where the basis of all of the information that I just shared on Paul Benowitz came from.
So you mentioned Travis Walton, and I'm glad you brought that name up. Where does his story fit in on all this?
I believe that the abduction phenomenon is the military.
Hmm.
And I believe that it has been the military from the very beginning. And taking them to
So,
a underground base or some sort of base and making them believe that it's extraterrestrials. I mean, there's evidence of that in a book that was written in 1985 that talked about how the government would get kids dressed up in gray alien costumes and abduct people in the middle of the night and take them to some hangar, and they would hit them with what was called a stun gun that was like a memory suppressant. So after they would
mm,
abduct them, they would hit them with the stun gun, suppress their memories, and then years later, the memories would come to the forefront of their mind, and then they would be like, "Oh my God, that's so weird. What actually did happen to me? I've got this weird missing time." It's just to reinforce the alien narrative. to make people
kind
believe
of
that it's aliens,
the
right? Because you can't do anything about aliens. Aliens are the boogeyman in the sky. The UFOs, the technology is so far past and so much more crazy than any of us can ever imagine. There's nothing that we can do about any of that shit.
mm-hmm.
But if it's the military, bro, that's a different story. We can do something about the military. Yep, it's the perfect cover. It's the perfect cover up. I believe all of it's military technology. And
Mm-hmm.
they've been using the alien narrative as cover up for it. See, there's a lot of double speak and word magic going on with a lot of the terminology that's been tossed around. Crash retrieval. Crash retrieval doesn't mean what you think crash retrieval means. Crash retrieval can mean an archaeological dig, some sort of ancient
Mm,
technology. Okay, because it doesn't matter
interesting.
how long ago or when you find some sort of advanced technology, they still disguise it as a crash retrieval, no matter if it happened 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, it's still a crash
That's a
retrieval.
great point.
And
That's a
also
great
with
point.
aliens, we had the alien invasion already happened, and it happened at the border. That's what that was. And extraterrestrial just means extra land, people from other land, right? If we were to pick up and go to any other country besides the United States from where we were born, we would be considered aliens in that country.
Yeah, 100%.
So another person coming from another country to our country, they're an alien. Then we got illegal
Mm-hmm.
aliens that is here illegally. And Trump comes in, closes the border, stops and defeats the aliens.
Bro, dude, yeah, when you put it like that, that's crazy.
I mean, that's what it is. It's word magic. They play these word magic games all the time. And you have to be able to decode exactly what it is that they're seeing because there's double meanings, things that the public thinks means one thing, but it really means something completely different. And that's been happening for a long
Mm-hmm.
time. It's secret society word magic. It's going to be exactly like the Epstein files where we'll probably get some kind of word search type of releasing of the documents where you got to have the keyword to type it in. You got to know what it is that you're looking for in order to search it up. It'll probably be heavily redacted. There's not going to be any more information. It's just going to be like another Project Blue Book type of thing. I mean, what's his name? The head of Arrow. I'm blinking on his name right now, but they did that in that giant UFO report. I don't know if you saw it. It was released
Mm-mm.
like a year ago, where they said that none of this stuff is real. That they investigated everything to do with UFOs and everything to do with aliens, and it's a misidentification of real technology. It's military drones, and everything has been done by circular reporting by people that believe it and is propagating the mythology of UFOs when there's not any truth to any of it.
Yeah, all those drone sightings and stuff off the east.
Jersey drones, then we had the Chinese spy balloons before that that were supposedly shot down. There's it's military drones. It's military technology. It's AI. I'm sure a lot of them is AI by now. I mean, I don't know if you heard RFK on Theo Vaughn recently. He said that 70 to 75% of people that are eligible to go into the military cannot go into the military. Did you hear
Because they're
that?
not standards eligible.
Exactly. They got all of these problems. They got all these issues, mental health issues, obesity, medications that are preventing them from joining the military. So when 70 to 77% of the US population that is eligible to be in the military cannot join the military, who is the military for? That means that they're not expecting a lot of people to join the military. So in 10 to 20 years, the military personnel, and it's been rapidly declining. It's been down 38% in since the year of 2000, military recruitment.
Ooh.
Okay. So that means that we're going to get more drones, AI facial recognition drones, more AI, more cyber stuff, more private corporations, more government contractors, and they're going to slowly phase out the human component of the military. Just like
Mhm.
they are going to slowly phase out the human component in jobs and working
Mhm.
and going to the grocery store. I mean, when you go to the grocery store, how many how many checkout lanes with people that can actually check you out are open? One or two?
Yeah, one or two. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so eventually it's going to get to the point where all of this stuff, I mean, Elon Musk saying just last year, if you don't get rich, you don't make all your money in the next 4 years, then it's not going to matter anymore.
That's interesting.
So what does that mean? That means that jobs, the military, our way of life is going to be taken over by AI. And what does that mean? That means more surveillance. That means possibly 100% digital ID. Everything is going to be digitized. And we've seen that push since the invention of computers is to digitize everything, make everything on your phone, read on your phone, watch movies on your phone, watch TV shows on your phone. You know, I mean, this is the biggest tracking device that has ever existed. They no longer have to tap your
Bingo.
phones anymore. They got a device right in front of your face that is tracking you everywhere you go. I mean, there's a freaking biometric scan on here that said there's a health app. They got a freaking health app on there now.
Yeah, that's crazy too. Get to detect your heart rate and all that and everything. And then also facial recognition to open your phone. Also thumbprint scans to open your phone sometimes, depending on how you got it set up. Yeah, they've got everything on you.
And this shit can read your mind, dude. That was the whole thing with the Pokemon Go app that Niantic was
Bingo.
doing. That was to literally track and trace and scan the entire world for AI.
Hmm.
We've been in the digital currency. It's been a thing. Our
Hmm.
money has been in the bank and has been a digital number for 2 decades now. Well, since banks have been a thing and since you've had a debit card, it's been a digital currency. It's always been a
Yeah.
digital currency. And then when you put your money in, they're then allowed to borrow $8 on every dollar that you've put into the bank.
Hmm.
So they're just printing money out of nothing. It's just money out of nothing. Debt. They can issue out eight
It's a
dollars of debt for every single dollar that you have in the bank.
remind everybody where they can find you, and I'll put all your links in the show notes too.
You can find me on Raised by Giants on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcast, and you can watch my documentaries, JFKX, Solving the Crime of the Century, A Clockwork Shining, Kubrick's Odyssey 3 on Amazon and Tubi. And you can reach out to me on social media at Facebook, Raised by Giants, Instagram, Raised by Giants Pod, and Twitter X, Raised by Giants 8. Thanks so much for having me on, brother. Really appreciate it.